Good morning, everybody. Yes, we are the final panel before lunch. Appreciate people are probably quite peckish right now, but we're excited to build on the momentum of this morning's panels, which have been quite thought-provoking, very intriguing, and we've got a discussion here talking about digital-first strategies, digital-first innovation strategies, and I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by two people who are vastly experienced in this field, very much qualified to talk to it. So welcome, Julie and Benny. Thanks for being here today. Before we kind of get into the kind of meat of it, I guess, I just want to provide a quick little introduction to myself. So my name is Freddie. I'm one of the senior sales directors at LG Ad Solutions. For the avoidance of doubt, we are part of LG Electronics, who, of course, crafts some of the finest OLED TVs, in fact, the finest OLED TVs in the business. TVs that can be found in around about 165 million households all around the world. And that LG Ad Solutions, our mission, our purpose is pretty clear. It's to, of course, connect brands more effectively with those households through by leveraging essentially deterministic first-party viewership data intelligence that sits behind that big piece of glass, and that is essentially predicated on what we call ACR technology, automatic content recognition technology. And it's that essentially that I suppose allows brands to forge deeper connections with those households through, more relevant, more targeted, and more addressable CTV advertising, all within the canvas of an LG TV. So that's my quick little plug. If you want to know more about that, do come and find me after this session, maybe over lunch as well. But I want to turn my attention to our guests here. Julie, Benny, if you could just provide a quick kind of introduction to yourself, your role, and a bit on your background as well. Julie, do you want to kick us off? Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, Benny, you start.
Carrying this panel single-handedly. Hi, everyone. I'm Benny. So I'm based here in London. I've been with Diageo for about 7 years. So Diageo is the biggest premium spirits company. We have over 200 brands, including Johnny Walker, Guinness, Baileys, a lot of fantastic brands. My background before Diageo was actually mostly on the venture side, so at different startups in marketing technology, in social impact tech, fintech, did a bunch of innovation consulting. Joined Diageo back then to very much look at their MadTech startup stack. So who are they working with? Who are the disruptors in marketing, brand tech, innovation that we should importantly identify, but even more importantly, get out of PowerPoint and actually test what the use case is for us and how we scale that. So I did that first in Europe, then led the global digital innovation team, and now I'm actually part of something called the Breakthrough Innovation Team. So we're really looking at those transformative, beyond the bottle opportunities that are really either stretching our own capabilities or stretching consumer behavior. So really very much focused on the what's next, what's the business model innovation, how are emerging technologies changing the way that consumers find our products, purchase our products, share our products, but also how they actually celebrate socially in general. So I'm having fun. It's a good job.
Yes, I'm here. Hi, I'm Julie Austin. So I'm Senior Channels Director at VML Enterprise Solutions. So I lead an amazing team. We're working with fantastic clients across the full digital landscape, really focused on commerce optimization through to retail media, about how do you look to consumers wherever they're finding you. My past is I spent 20 years brand side, so at board level on digital marketing and brands. So I'm always with the lens of how would this help me in the boardroom when I'm thinking about how I innovate and how we support our clients.
Perfect. So I want to start off a little bit informal. So probably going off piste a little bit here. Maybe a little light aperitif before the main meal. I hope you enjoyed that pun, Benny, right there. And speaking of aperitifs, obviously Diageo, have a lot of brands within your kind of portfolio at the moment. I mean, just to name a few. Of course, you've got the likes of Guinness, Smirnoff, Johnny Walker, Baileys, Tanqueray. I mean, the list goes on. In fact, there's probably over 200 brands that sit within your portfolios, which I was quite shocked to hear about. To be honest, I didn't know it was that much. But I guess I'd just like to know, just a bit of an icebreaker, I guess. Out of all those brands, which ones would you choose to be your desert island drink? And why as well, maybe?
It's a tough one. Yeah, it is picking one of your 200 favorite children. If it's a desert island, if I have access to refrigeration, like solar panel fridge, I probably still would go for Guinness. Plus Guinness, you have the 0.0, which is great if you haven't tried it. It's pretty close to the real thing. And Guinness, so good to have a bit of variety. So it would be Guinness, love that brand. And if you think about sort of my job, that's a brand that's over 200 years old. When Arthur Guinness signed the lease for the actual original brewery, he signed a 1,000-year lease. Right? That's how confident he was in that and how visionary. And we're now, it's our responsibility to make sure we don't screw it up and keep it relevant. But it's a fantastic drink, so that would be my pick.
Julie, I'm going to extend that to you as well. I appreciate you don't work at Diageo, but maybe you have a
I'm an avid consumer.
Oh, really?
And a fan. This was actually the easiest question that you had. So definitely spicy margarita made with Casamigos tequila, but with sake, not sugar syrup.
Interesting. I think I'll probably I'll get all practical and go down the seedlip route. Give me the best chance of surviving if I was actually deserted on a tropical island. But if I knew no one was coming, yeah, probably a nightcap with Johnny Walker or something like that, absolutely. Anyway, sorry, we digress massively. So our topic, as I say, is talking about digital-first innovation strategies. And I just want to kind of strip that back a little bit and just kind of hone in a little bit more on the kind of innovation side of things. We know, obviously, innovation means very different things to different people. It's probably on the spectrum of some sort. But I guess given your evolving experiences, it'd be great to get your perspective on what innovation means in its kind of purest form. I don't know who wants to start. Julie, do you want to do
Sure.
that?
And I think it's a really pertinent question because actually every brand defines innovation really differently. And often the success or failure of innovation comes between really being clear on what innovation means to you and to your board and to your consumers before you start it. For me, innovation is creative ideas that are transformed into purposeful actions. So I think it's easy to look at innovation as something that a team over there does or something that's all blue sky. But for me, without the how are you actually going to make it happen, it's the front end of the pantomime horse. So we need the button too. So for me, it's really about that. How are we finding new ways of doing things, purposeful, creative ideation, but making it so we can actually make impact?
Interesting. Benny, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, first of all, I think it's a very good question. And as you might have noticed, I have global, digital, and innovation in my title, which is a bit like ChatGPT sort of title bingo. And I think innovation, it's exactly that point. We're not inventors, we're innovators, meaning if there's a great idea, we actually look at the application of that idea to drive progress, right? And progress for me can be value in different ways, but it's an advancement. It's a solution that's better than what has come before, right? Now, within an organization, certainly in Diageo, we're very mindful that there are very different types of innovations. There's incremental innovation, there's core innovation, there's adjacent innovation. As I talked about, I mostly now focus on breakthrough innovations, so that's really that stretch in terms of capability or consumer behavior. But you actually don't want an organization full of innovators because that's chaos, right? So you actually need to define sort of what's the end goal of that innovation and what's the mandate of the innovation, and it helps if you have nomenclature around that works for your organization.
Yeah, it's an interesting take on it. I've often, I suppose in a very naive way, with my naive mind, I guess, in thinking about innovation, I've always just kind of thought about it as this kind of perpetual pursuit of just challenging the status quo, right? Which is, I suppose, based on the premise that, if brands are always making the logical choices, particularly with their marketing efforts, aren't they just going to end up being in the same places as their competitors, right? Which I think, is a good segue actually into my second question, which is, clearly every brand wants a competitive edge. They want to sell more of their products, against their competitors. But, what is it that makes a brand marketer or a CMO kind of say, hey, look, we need to do something different here. Like, we need to do something a bit more radical. Is that almost emanating from a particular business challenge, or is it just completely and utterly consumer-centric, or is it based on what your competitors are doing? Benny, I would like to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think ideally it comes from a vision, from an identification of growth opportunities and being early on in understanding a shift in consumer. So we talk about unmet consumer desires, right? Something you can grow into. Reality is, I think it's often urgency, right? So it is the pressure, it is something going wrong. But that's often, I think, the sort of difference between great leadership in marketing innovation to really enable teams to take that risk, to think big but start small, start experimenting towards. In Diageo, we often talk about preferred futures. So we have a foresight team that looks at, here are some macro trends we see happening. What is our ideal version of that, and how can we influence it now, and what are the stepping stones to get there? So trying to give the organization a bit of a blueprint of how you get there, rather than just reacting to shocks to the system where it's a necessity.
What about you, Julie? What are you seeing maybe from some of the other brands that you're servicing as well on that? What is it that's driving them to ultimately innovate in that sense?
Definitely, I agree with Benny massively. I think there's a perfect trifecta, which is business, brand. What as a brand are you trying to do? Because brand always should be king or queen. We shouldn't deviate from where we want to be, how we want to show up. And then what do you know about consumer behavior? What's changing today, but what do we foresee changing? But then we shouldn't dismiss, actually, to the point about urgency, sometimes bad trading numbers, tough headwinds ahead are the things that take innovation from being a concept to being a requirement. So actually being able to articulate innovation requirement around those three things, what it's doing for our brand, how it's supporting our consumer, but also, let's be realistic, how it's going to help the bottom line either today or in the future, is a way that often we can get innovation moving forward.
So maybe those are some of the kind of external conditions that are kind of driving that need to innovate. But Julie, I'd love to get your thoughts on maybe what are some of the kind of internal conditions that are necessary for innovations to flourish. How do you gain consensus and alignment from actually multiple stakeholders internally who, despite maybe having the same overarching goals, may show some kind of resistance to some of those ideas? Love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and it goes back to the whole conversation we're talking about about the word innovation and it having such different meanings. That definition, often I see back brand side and now, the difference between success and failure on digital innovation or any innovation is often at board level. It's not at implementation level. And that is a realism and an adjoinment on what is it we're trying to do, how are we trying to do it, what are we going to invest to do it, and really importantly, what are those KPIs around it? And then the other part to that is how do we protect it? Because it's really easy when you're sat on a 2-day away strategy meeting to go, 5-year plan, let's innovate. Here you go, here's all our things we're going to do. And then you have a quarter where trading numbers haven't been met. And all of a sudden it's how you're going to meet the EBITDA for next month and innovation's gone. So it needs a real ring fence and a protection. I think what often helps that conversation is future innovation's really, really key to not always be in the now. But what often unlocks boards and kind of business confidence around innovation is short, medium, and long-term delivery. So innovation can be something that's CRO-based. It can be an action you're making on your website that can happen next week. It can be a change in delivery. It doesn't have to always be big blue sky thinking. And being able to really demonstrate where you're unlocking return on investment and you're unlocking the power of innovation in a short way as well as a medium and a long often gives it a lot more buy-in long-term. I think the only other thing I'd add to that is actually innovation works and breeds best when it's not behind closed doors. So inviting wider stakeholders into innovation is often where I've seen the adaptation better. So we're working on new store concepts, future store of tomorrow. Well, is there someone from customer services in that group? Is there someone from your retail stores in that group? Have you qual and quantified it with your consumer base? Don't kind of live within the bubble that you're in to make sure that it's going to work for now and tomorrow.
It's interesting, Benny. Do you find there are any kind of internal kind of push and pull on things that you're trying to ultimately do from an innovation or digital innovation perspective, or do you have kind of full carte blanche on what you want to do, essentially?
Unfortunately not, and that's probably a good thing. No, I think it's absolutely the right point, and there needs to be a certain culture of failure, right? Or not failure, but actually the ability to learn by doing something new, right? And then building on that. So that's kind of building the culture. But as said before, in our organization, a lot of people are focused on optimizing returns, reducing risk, right? You don't need to break them out there, but you need these collaborators to get it right. So one of the things we try to do is quite systematic about the way we view innovation and the different stages of it. So again, you have sort of that, you have innovation in the now, which is often kind of optimization, but people might see that differently. You have what's new, you have the what's next, and you have different risk stages. And it often starts with experimentation. And for the experimentation, that can be quite fast, that can be quite cheap, and you can create the conditions around there. For example, my team, we have a digital sandbox environment. So we can test new experiences, and when we look at mixed reality, when we look at blockchain, different things, we can do that in that environment without going through the whole procurement process and sort of onboarding that we normally would need, right? We also have a special sort of innovation process that's really lean evidence-based, where with every gate you clear, so you increase the evidence you have to scale up and get more investment, right? So that all helps with that experimentation phase. I think the toughest bit is still how do you actually integrate innovation that you have validated? Because that's sort of that no man's land between testing and actually integrating, right? Where you might have evidence, but you're not operating at scale yet. So you compete with things that are actually operating at scale, but you're actually in a growth stage. And I think that's where, including us, but a lot of corporates still struggle with.
So yeah, let's kind of focus now a little bit more on those digital innovations. Clearly a lot of brands, and we've talked a lot about this today. We talk about digital first strategies. I think we've also talked about a lot today that maybe it's not necessarily digital first, maybe it's consumer first, customer first strategies in that sense. And ultimately, I imagine brands, of course, are just trying to get a lot of their audiences to celebrate their brand and maybe feel something for the brand as well. I think I've mentioned to you both a quote that I quite like from the late Maya Angelou, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. But one of her favorite quotes, which I must admit I've used in too many a strategy deck in the past through my agency days, was talking about how people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never ever forget how you made them feel. And there's something there for brands to kind of take on, I feel. And I guess when thinking about digital first strategies, how can we create genuine connections with those audiences and even branded experiences that ultimately resonate, emotionally with those audiences and get them to feel something for the brand? I mean, Benny, I'd like to get your thoughts on that, because no doubt you probably thought about this a lot in your endeavors.
Yeah, and I think you made that key point in the beginning. It's about putting the consumer or customer first. And if you think about Diageo products, right, we are really in that business of social celebration. And doesn't matter if you're at a long day at work and you want to have a Zacapa old-fashioned at home, or you're meeting with friends and you're baking, you have a Baileys with it, but that occasion thinking and then understanding that entire consumer journey around it. What are the digital touch points that are really value adding in that, right? How do you help with choice? How do you enhance that situation using digital? And I think it's also important, being in the digital industry, it's very easy to sort of buy into the hype. There's certain occasions, like in the on-trade, in our parlance, so in bars and restaurants, often the last thing people want is actually to have any digital layer or digital touch point in that specific occasion. That's actually their digital detox, where they're connecting with other people over a drink. So the last thing we want to do is put an iPad in their face to ask them about their experience, right? And I think it's having that guidance-led, but then being really technology agnostic around what are opportunities, how we can enhance that, and how is that changing.
Julie, anything to add to that?
When we were chatting yesterday and having our quote off, my favourite quote is from the OG of marketing herself, and I try and get a quote in from her at every talk I do, which is Dolly Parton. And she talks about find out who you are and you do it on purpose. And I think that's inherently true with strategy. It's really easy I've seen so many, I'm being part of strategies that are plus 10% revenue growth. And then what are we going to do to make that happen is the back thought. Actually, strategy should be around what do you as a brand, and really importantly, what do you and your consumers need from you, and what do they need from you in each of those channels that they're showing up, and being the best that you can in all of those channels. And then ultimately, revenue growth should come from that. Then it's just about prioritization. So always, if in doubt, follow Dolly is my advice there.
Yeah, I might have to use that myself at some point. Perfect. I want to kind of pivot a little bit to go a bit more specific, something that's obviously close to you guys over at Diageo. I believe, I don't know exactly when it was, but you started a new function within the business. I believe it's called Fusion, if I'm not mistaken, which is basically, if I'm not mistaken, Diageo's kind of incubator for some of those kind of emerging technology scale-ups to maybe help answer some of the objectives that you're have been kind of pushed down towards yourself. I'd love to just get a very kind of quick overview of actually what that is, maybe also some successes and maybe also some challenges that you've had with that function, Benny.
Yeah, happy to share that. And full cover, the program is not done yet. It's the first year we're running it, but I'm happy to share a bit why we're doing this and what we're seeing so far. And so again, in an innovation function, open innovation, understanding what's happening out there is crucial. Understanding that we as Diageo, we have some of the greatest liquid scientists in the world. We make beautiful drinks. We put them in a bottle. We tell a nice story around them. But we're not disruptors in AI and AR and blockchain and any digital buzzword you throw at us. And we need to realize that, right? So we're set off to partner with the best out there and let them disrupt us, let them challenge us, right? So we have programs like Distill Ventures, where we invest in spirit entrepreneurs. We have DSS, where we Diageo Sustainability Solutions, where we identify specific sustainability solutions that can be plugged and tested. What Fusion does is a lot sort of earlier stages really around discovery. So we have a program, we started this cohort end of last year, and our first cohort is all about really celebrate the future of celebrating at home, right? How will people celebrate differently in the home? So a really broad mandate, and we spoke to the VC community, people around the world. We have Founders Intelligence, an execution partner on it, but we received over 300 applications of companies that want to be part of that cohort. We only focused on growth stage companies, so not early stage, because they need to be enterprise ready. If there's momentum, we need to be able to work together. Companies that have a market fit, but that brings something really different to us, that might come from the world of gaming or VR or other things, and let them challenge us on where is this future going, how are consumers changing. And then we designed a program around that where we ask them, we don't take investment, we don't put investment in, we don't take equity, because really good scale-ups, they can get smart money a lot of places. What they want is access to our industry understanding, our brands, our markets, right? So we're designing this program to go through, and we're wiggling down. We're in phase 2, so we brought it down. We had a cohort of 18 companies, now we're down to 8. And in May, we're going to have our demo day when we're going to take 3 to 5 of these companies into build stage. And at that stage, we could either run a pilot, invest in them, start a joint venture. So we're flexible about how we go to market, but we have really senior sponsorship, a lot of people in Diageo involved to get to those solutions.
Anyone who's working in emerging technologies in the audience today might worth be having a conversation with Benny after this if you feel like you might be able to support that for sure. With all of these things, obviously, it's great to be able to do, to be innovative, think about these kind of projects. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they need to work. From a measurement standpoint, how does one really measure the success, of some of these innovations, especially those that are maybe intended to enhance the consumer experience? I mean, maybe Julie, I don't know if you've got any thoughts around that for some of the brands that you service in particular.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately that's the agreement you have when you start. And it's qual, and it's ROI. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. Not all innovation should be revenue driving. Not all innovation should actually even contribute to the financial plan. Some of it's about real future thinking. I think it's easy in the Hunger Games of prioritization to put high value, as in financial value, against innovation that can deliver that can deliver conversion, that can deliver immediate financial return. But actually, those qual, that customer loyalty, that customer advocacy, they are all contributors, harder to measure, but really important that they're there in your innovation strategy. And then ultimately, ROI has to be there. You have to pay for what you innovate at some form. But again, that goes to short, medium, and long term in terms of how you're approaching it. So it is a very broad answer because ultimately it's you should be looking at every factor. I think my challenge is more that when you're looking at innovation as a whole, it's are you covering all? Are you looking at hearts, minds, as well as wallets?
Would you agree with that, Benny?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly difficult. I think there needs to be a realization that different innovations serve different purpose. So the way we look at it, we have three categories. One is direct, which means there's a revenue increase, and we think we can establish a correlation, measure that. There's indirect, which we have a couple of subcategories around brand fame building or something like promoter score, something that might be part of that. And then there's a specific sustainability ESG targets. And then I think one thing that you have to do differently than in the startup world, for example, where you can say, well, our total addressable market is X and we're going to own 15% share. That's not going to fly in a corporate, right? So I think what we do, we draw a think big vision and quite early stage sort of map a couple of different pathways how we could get to scale and what they might need. And that's both what's the impact, but also what's the investment required, right? And that's part of the equation where you say, how hard is it? How big can it get? And that helps you prioritize. And then we create learning plans where, again, first stage we say, there's so many unknowns. Let's keep it very light. We want some signals on desirability, viability, feasibility. If we have that, we put a bit more money in to validate that more, and you increase that confidence and therefore your business plan as well. So it's probably more art than science, but we're trying to be systematic about it.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly complicated, I must admit.
There you go. Oh, bored everyone to hell.
No, it is interesting. It's, I guess, kind of, we're talking about the now, really. I mean, obviously everyone's talking about AI and blockchain, special technologies, and all this kind of stuff. These are maybe some of the. I mean, are they emerging technologies? Maybe they're trends now. They're not fads or anything like that. I guess it'd be interesting to know maybe like what you believe to be the future emerging technologies, particularly when it comes to kind of consumer engagement with brands. Are there areas that we're not really aware of that you think are going to come to the fore, and that brands are going to be thinking about more and more in the future? I don't know who wants to answer that one first.
I'll attempt it. So what's coming in the future? So bingo time, I'll mention AI, of course. There's a couple of things I'm really excited about, and because it's such a broad subject, right, we're talking about here, and what's coming out of it is really broad as well. So we're, from a VML perspective, we're seeing amazing things happening with content automation and creation that's freeing up teams' ability to be creative, and that for me is the most exciting part of AI evolution. The evolving of that technology, if we're focusing on that for now, that I'm the most excited about, is it feels personalization is something that from a conference round, I feel we've talked about maybe 5 years or so. And actually the amount of retailers and brands that are doing true hyper-personalization that feels exciting and directive and not intrusive is really small. Actually, I'm really interested to see how AI evolves and how it really supports not just the creation of content, but actually the next stage of segmentation and how hyper-personalization becomes more possible. Because at the moment, it feels quite out of most brands and most sort of budgets in terms of being able to do. So that's where I'm excited where the technology is going.
Benny?
Yeah, I'm afraid it's tough to answer that question without touching on AI. And I think sort of the parallel is a bit in the 1880s where you had electrification, right? And if you were in the business of creating pumps, you were now doing electric pumps, right? If you're in transport, it was now electric transport. We're seeing that it's touching everything from HR to legal to creative processes, right? So absolutely fascinating. And I was reading a stat the other day that 50% of the labor force will have to be retrained in the next 5 years, right? And that actually, if you look traditionally, normally the sort of life cycle of a skill is around 20 years. That's coming down to 4 to 5 years, right? So what that means culturally and for organizations, especially big organizations like ours, to stay on top of that and leverage that is both terrifying and incredibly exciting, right? And I mean, there's a lot, we talk about content creation, all that lot, but I think in terms of business models, I think co-creation with consumers, community building, right? And as you often have in technologies, the magic starts to happen when different technologies are merging. And if you look at space from digital avatars to good old blockchain, which has its moments, now people are quiet about it. I think actually if you look that and sort of organizing principles of how you work with communities, layering AI over that is absolutely fascinating. And then I throw a nerdy curveball in as well, which is one of those people don't speak enough about because I think most journalists probably don't understand it, but it's quantum computing. Right. Which is actually, I mean, fundamentally changing the ability of how we can process some of these things, right? If you think computing language has always been 0 and 1s, a linear process, that's changing. And what that can enable in terms of, you know, everything from latencies to sort of different digital experiences is another emerging technology. They're all converging, so exciting times, yeah.
Can I expand on that? Because I actually thought that was a really interesting point, and I love the nerdy curveball at any point. I think the world of work point's a really interesting one. And again, what AI really enables is the World Economic Forum recently did their Future of Work report, which, nerdy curveball, if you're interested in reading it, is a really interesting read. But they're talking about kind of the skills that are going to be required over the next 10 years. And I sit as a trustee on an education board as well. It's because it's really interesting to see where this is coming for our next generation and how helping them to be ready. And actually, when they cite their top 10 skills, of course, AI and big data is in there, but it's number 8. And actually, what I find really heartening and exciting about this is number 5, the top 5 are resilience, agility, technical understanding, adaptability, and number 1 is creative thinking. And that for me is who hasn't worked on a team where they're so mired in the BAU and the day-to-day and the next month and the month after that. What AI is freedom. It enables teams to be creative. And I think actually the conversations we're having with our clients and internally are how do we enable that creativity to happen more, and how can AI play a part in that, which is like what I think is really exciting.
Yeah, so we're all going to have to upskill in other sectors then, by the sounds of it, which should be fun. Look, I think we're actually probably over time now, so apologies for that. It's been honestly a fascinating chat, and thank you so much for providing your perspectives and your insights on this subject matter. We probably don't have time for Q&A, do we? So apologies, but if anyone wants to ask any questions of these guys afterwards, do go and grab them after this session. But a round of applause for our guests, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.